Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to be taking a close look at the Ares Inferno and the Ares Ion. Both of these ships are currently in the concept phase, and I purposely held off making this video until after the Q&A for it was released. And this is mainly because I didn't want to publish something while I still had several open-ended questions about these ships. And I'm glad that I did, because now I have all the information that I wanted about them, especially about a few things that for me were definitely deal breakers. In the ship's brochure, the Ares is described as being capable of long-range deployment, is armed with high-velocity weaponry, is able to negate or disable capital-class shields, is effective at solo gunship engagements, and has fleet-leading capabilities in terms of its power and defense. First off, on paper, this ship seems amazing. It's because of the firepower that it brings to the table, and because it only requires a single pilot to utilize its full potential. To sum up what this ship is basically a big flying turret that can fire missiles. It's medium-sized in every aspect and has at least one medium-sized component running each of its various functions, and in some instances it has two or even three. Which it should be noted that having three medium-sized components is the equivalent to having one large one. It doesn't have any interior space, just a cockpit for the pilot to climb into, so that means no amenities, no ability to satisfy any of the survival mechanics, and it doesn't provide any way for the pilot to log off and save their position. It's going to be very single-minded in how it performs its intended role. The Ares comes in two varieties, the Ion and the Inferno. Both ships have a size 7 weapon mounted onto its shoulder, and they each come equipped with the same allotment of 16 size 3 missiles. And speaking of missiles, 8 of them are stored internally, so the size of those missiles are going to be fixed. But the other additional 8 missiles are externally mounted, meaning that you're going to be able to change their rack size and swap it out for more smaller sized missiles or less larger ones. The Ion comes equipped with an SF-7E bearing laser cannon, which is exclusive to this ship. It's described as being highly accurate and is going to deal a lot of damage, firing at a rate of 38 rounds per minute. While the Inferno has an FS-7B ballistic Gatling gun that also does high amounts of damage and fires 1900 rounds per minute. Both ships are outfitted with a full complement of medium-sized components, but the Ion has 2 power plants, 3 shield generators, and 3 coolers, while the Inferno only has 1 power plant, 2 coolers, and 2 shield generators. Both of them have medium-sized armor, but the Inferno is outfitted with a special variant that's going to be better suited for absorbing ballistics fire. Here are the main things that concern me when it comes to this ship. It's being billed as a capital class slayer. Now there's no doubt that it's going to be effective in its job, but how effective it's going to be is the real question, and just how many of these ships do they imagine that you're going to actually need in order to take one down? In the Q&A, they stated that this is all going to depend on the type of capital class ship that you're going up against, and what kind of loadout it has, and so on. So they really didn't even provide some kind of a ballpark figure for us to go by at this time. The new meta surrounding this ship is that most people seem to prefer the idea of having 7 Ares over having 1 Hammerhead. And that number comes from comparing the size of a Hammerhead's crew if it consisted of 6 gunners and a pilot. Just how true this ends up being is going to have to remain to be seen, since you can argue these facts on paper all you want. But that isn't going to have any bearing on anything until you can actually get these ships in-game to really test their effectiveness out. And that's why I try not to entertain these types of arguments too often, mainly because they're purely academic at this point. The size 7 guns on both the Ion and the Inferno are going to be fixed. You're not going to be able to gimbal it or replace it with another weapon. You aren't even going to be able to switch it out for the Ion's weapon or the Inferno's or vice versa. Their weapons are bespoke to the ship and that ship only. The upside to this is that their guns are going to be purpose-built to function with their intended ship. And that's why the Ion has an additional power plant and why the Inferno has a dedicated ammo storage that increases its capacity to 2 to 3 times that of a typical ballistic weapon. And although this is subject to change, both of the Ares weapons are intended to be able to inflict over 2,400 points of damage per second and has a range of over 8 kilometers. Being integrated into the ship has a downside to these weapons as well. Like for instance, not being able to gimbal these guns means that they're not going to be very effective against smaller, faster craft. The missiles are going to be able to help compensate for this, but remember that it takes time to get a lock on. And if the target is ducking and weaving out of your range, then it's going to make it that much more difficult to lock onto them, especially for size 3 missiles. Just in case you didn't know, the bigger the missile is, the longer the lock-on time for it is going to be. And on the flip side, trying to take an Ares down is going to be like trying to destroy a Freelancer Miss, a Vanguard Harbinger, or a Warden. Except that the Inferno is going to be particularly resistant to ballistics fire, and the Ion has the equivalent to a large shield protecting it. The Ares is going to be very effective when going up against other medium-sized craft, and it's going to really shine when you're attacking large vessels. This is because large vessels are very exposed. They have a big cross-section which presents a nice thick target for you to hit, and it doesn't alter its speed very well or have a good turning radius when compared to smaller ships, and they often have glaringly large blind spots that can be easily exploited. Any large vessel that doesn't have a fighter escort to accompany it should probably just turn and run at the sight of an Ares, and that's what I'm a little afraid of when it comes to this ship. That it's going to become the new griefing tool of choice, where Inferno pilots who have nothing better to do are just going to be spending their time hunting large ships like Caterpillars, Carracks, Starfarers, and Hercules just to blow them up and watch the pretty explosions go off. And there's no real alternative to this other than having to finally give in to the ever-expanding arms race and stop going on expensive cargo runs without a fighter escort. I'm going to be honest with you, when I first heard about the Ares, I wanted to be able to take the Ion and swap out its laser guns for the size 7 Gatling. That way I'd have the weapon that I wanted along with bigger shields and an extra power plant. And I considered that to be a fair trade-off for the cooler looking paint job, ballistic armor, and extra ammo storage. Or better yet, I wanted to at least gimbal a size 6 Gatling onto it, or something else like a size 7 attrition repeater. Which of course you can't do any of these things. A final concern I had about this ship was about its maneuverability. The Q&A simply stated that it's not going to be nimble for its size, and that its movement is going to be more closely compared to a Vanguard or a Freelancer. But my real question is, where exactly does that fit within this category? Is it going to be faster or slower than those ships? Or perhaps maybe somewhere down the middle? Some other things that the Q&A mentioned about the Ares was that it's going to be able to turn its power plant off and run the ship using batteries, which are components that most ships will be able to use to lower their signature and thus reduce their visibility. And also, the only capital class ship that could carry the Ares is going to be the Javelin. It's too wide to fit into an Idris, Polaris, or an 890 jump, but it could fit onto one of the larger pads you'll find on a Kraken. In the long run, this ship is going to end up being a fierce long-range medium-class ship once it's been released out into the wild, and its only natural predator is going to be a more nimble fighter craft that can put out enough DPS to break past its medium-class shields. And when they're flocking together into larger groups, they'll be able to collectively take down even a capital-class threat. It does a lot of damage for a ship of its size, and it's going to be able to take a lot of abuse in return. Well, that's going to be it for this look at the Ares and its variants. I've been your host, Law of the West. Thanks for tuning in, and take care.